Right now, somewhere in America, a boat owner is about to get a phone call that will change everything. The mechanic on the other end won't have good news. The part they need? Discontinued. The wait for another technician? 6 months. The repair bill? More than the boat is worth. And here's what no one in the industry wants to admit. This isn't bad luck. It's a collision course. 5 invisible forces, all crashing together at the same time. By 2026, millions of boat owners will face a choice they never saw coming. What's about to hit? And why has no one warned you? To understand what's coming, you first have to understand what already happened. In the spring of 2020, when the world shut down, Americans did something unexpected. They bought boats. Not just a few boats, millions of them. Families who had never set foot on a dock suddenly found themselves searching for anything that floated. Dealerships that had struggled for years couldn't keep inventory on the lot. Manufacturers worked overtime. Waiting lists stretched for months. It made sense. When restaurants closed, when travel stopped, when everything familiar disappeared, the water remained open. A boat became more than recreation. It became escape. It became sanity. For countless families, it became the one place they could breathe. The industry called it the boat boom, and for a few years, it looked like a miracle. Sales surged. New buyers flooded the market. The recreational marine industry in the United States reached $55 billion in total expenditures. Everyone was winning. But booms don't last forever. And when they end, they leave something behind. By 2024, the landscape had shifted. New retail powerboat sales began to slide. Through the first half of 2025, those sales dropped nearly 10% compared to the year before. The buyers who had rushed in during the pandemic were no longer rushing. Interest rates climbed. Inflation squeezed household budgets. The urgency that once drove people to dealerships had faded. Yet the boats remained. More than 850,000 used boats changed hands in 2024 alone, representing over 78% of all boat transactions that year. The used market had become the market, and buried within those numbers was a truth that few people were discussing openly. The majority of boats on American waterways were aging into a system that was never designed to support them. Think about who owns a boat today. Not the wealthy yacht owner with a captain on staff, not the tournament fisherman with sponsorship deals, the average boat owner. The family who bought a 10-year-old center console to take the kids tubing on summer weekends. The retiree who finally got that fishing boat he'd dreamed about for decades. The couple who found a deal on a pontoon and figured they'd learn as they went. These are the people who power the boating economy. They don't have backup boats. They don't have mechanics on retainer. They rely on local dealerships, independent service shops, and the assumption that when something breaks, someone nearby will know how to fix it. That assumption is about to be tested, because here's what most boat owners don't realize. Their boats exist at the intersection of several fragile systems. The availability of replacement parts, the presence of trained technicians, the economics of local dealerships, the affordability of insurance. Each of these systems developed independently over decades. Each faces its own pressures. And in 2026, those pressures will converge in ways that no single boat owner can control. The boats purchased during the pandemic boom are now 5 years old. They're leaving warranty periods. They're reaching the age where things start to break. Water pumps, lower units, ignition systems, the components that turn an engine into a paperweight when they fail. These boats need service. They need parts. They need expertise. And across the country, in service bays and parts warehouses and insurance offices, the infrastructure that should be waiting for them is quietly disappearing. This is not a story about one company's failure or one product's defect. This is a story about an entire ecosystem under strain. And it begins with a question that every boat owner should be asking. When my boat needs help, who will be there to provide it? The answer, for millions of Americans, may be no one. Walk into almost any marine dealership in America today, and you'll notice something missing. It's not the boats. Those are still there, lined up in showrooms and service bays. It's the people. More specifically, it's the technicians. In survey after survey, the numbers tell the same story. More than 90% of marine dealerships report difficulty filling service department positions. Not some dealers, not half. 90%. This isn't a regional problem or a temporary shortage. This is a structural collapse happening in plain sight. John Kukuk, vice chairman of the Wisconsin Marine Association and owner of a dealership in Marinette, put it bluntly. We as an industry are in a crisis mode. We can't find enough employees. His own dealership had been searching for a technician for over 5 years. 5 years of posting job listings. 5 years of interviewing candidates. 5 years of coming up empty. He's not alone. More than 20% of the positions that marine dealers budgeted for went unfilled in recent years. These aren't theoretical jobs. These are workstations sitting empty. These are boats sitting in service bays, waiting. These are customers being told to come back in 3 months, then 6 months, then maybe next season. One industry publication described the situation with unusual directness. It's no exaggeration to say that this workforce crisis may be the biggest challenge facing the boating industry right now. If there aren't enough people to build and service the boats and engines, none of the rest will matter. None of the rest will matter. Let that sink in. You can design the most advanced outboard engine ever built. You can offer the most competitive financing. You can run the slickest marketing campaign. But if there's no one to install it, maintain it, or repair it, you haven't sold a boat. You've sold a problem. So where did all the technicians go? Part of the answer lies in history. During the Great Recession that began in 2008, the marine industry contracted sharply. Dealerships closed. Service departments shrank. Experienced technicians, people who had spent decades learning their craft, left the field. Some retired early. Some moved to other industries. Some simply gave up on a business that seemed to be dying. The industry eventually recovered. The technicians did not come back. The ones who remained grew older. The average marine technician today carries decades of experience, knowledge passed down through years of hands-on work. But that generation is reaching retirement age, and behind them, the pipeline is nearly empty. Why? The reasons are painfully practical. Marine technician positions often pay less than comparable work in automotive, HVAC, or electrical trades. A young person with mechanical aptitude can become a plumber or an electrician and earn significantly more, with better benefits and clearer career paths. The math doesn't favor marine work. As one industry observer noted, the EI pay is usually poor, which is why so many technicians end up working for themselves after gaining a few years of experience. They leave dealerships to become independent operators, taking their skills with them and often limiting their availability to a handful of loyal customers. The result is a service landscape dotted with 6-month waiting lists and no longer accepting new customers' signs. Local shops that once handled everything from oil changes to complete rebuilds now turn away work. They don't have staff to complete. Boat owners drive hours to find available service, if they can find it at all. At a recent maritime trades convention, attendees shared a unanimous conclusion. There is a dramatic shortage of trained maritime labor right now. Schools that would normally compete for students are now collaborating because the need is so great that competition seems pointless. The gray-haired mechanic who rebuilt your father's outboard? He's retiring, and there is no one to replace him. Even if you find a technician, there's another barrier waiting. One that's invisible until the moment you need it to not exist. Parts. Here's something no boat dealer will tell you at the point of sale. The components that keep your engine running have an expiration date, not a physical one. These are well-engineered pieces of metal and plastic that can last for decades. The expiration date is corporate. It's decided in a boardroom. based on production economics and warehouse costs, and the cold calculation of how long a company should support a product line before moving on. Manufacturers only produce replacement parts for a certain period of time. Then they discontinue them. The industry term is NLA, no longer available. 3 letters that can turn a minor repair into a death sentence for your boat. If you own an older outboard motor, you may already know this frustration. Most boat dealers don't have the warehouse space or the financial incentive to stock slow-moving parts for engines that are 10, 15, or 20 years old. They focus on current models, on the products that generate today's revenue. The older stuff gets pushed aside, then phased out, then forgotten. One parts specialist described the situation this way. When manufacturers discontinue parts, boat owners are left in a difficult position. Often, older motors end up in the junkyard simply because the replacement parts don't exist anymore. Not because the engine can't be fixed, because the piece needed to fix it has vanished from the supply chain. This creates an underground economy. Small operators spend thousands of hours each year scouring the country for discontinued components. They buy old inventory from closing dealerships. They strip parts from salvaged engines. They stockpile gaskets and gears and impellers in warehouses, betting that someday someone will need exactly what they've saved. It's resourceful, it's necessary, and it's not a system. It's a patchwork, held together by individual effort and good luck. Then came May 2020. In the middle of a pandemic, with the boat boom in full swing, Bombardier Recreational Products made a stunning announcement. They were discontinuing production of Evinrude outboard engines immediately. The E-Tech and E-Tech G2 lines, engines that had been marketed as revolutionary, were done. No warning, no transition period, just done. The shock rippled through the industry. Evinrude had been building outboard motors for over 100 years. Suddenly, millions of boat owners found themselves with engines from a company that no longer existed. Parts support would diminish. Technical expertise would scatter. The long-term serviceability of every Evinrude on the water came into question overnight. But there's another wall, one that's harder to see and even harder to climb. Modern outboard engines are computers wrapped in aluminum. They run on software. They communicate through proprietary diagnostic systems. And increasingly, they can only be properly serviced by someone with access to manufacturer-specific tools that cost hundreds or thousands of dollars. Dealers use diagnostic software paired with specialized cables to read fault codes and troubleshoot problems. Independent mechanics often rely on generic scan tools or aftermarket adapters, which can limit their access to detailed information. Some functions are simply locked out without the right credentials. One boat owner described paying a mechanic over $100 just for diagnostics without receiving the actual report. He wanted to fix the problem himself, a sensor replacement that would take 10 minutes. But without the diagnostic codes, he was guessing. Another owner spent $600 on aftermarket software just to access basic information about his own engine. The boats we buy are becoming black boxes, repairable in theory, inaccessible in practice. And for owners of aging engines, the combination is devastating. Parts that don't exist, software they can't access, technicians who aren't available. Each wall alone might be surmountable. Together, they form a barrier that's pushing countless boats toward obsolescence years before their time. For decades, the local marine dealership was the anchor of boat ownership in America. It was where you bought your first boat, where you brought it for winterization, where the guy behind the counter knew your name and remembered what you'd ordered last spring. These weren't just businesses. They were institutions, woven into the fabric of waterfront communities from Maine to California. That fabric is unraveling. The numbers paint a stark picture. There are roughly 8,000 to 9,000 boat dealers in the United States, but that figure is misleading. Many of those dealers also sell snowmobiles, motorcycles, and all-terrain vehicles. When you count only businesses that focus exclusively on boats, marine engines, and related equipment, the number drops dramatically to somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000. That's it. 4,000 dealers to serve a nation of boat owners spread across 50 states, countless lakes, rivers, and coastlines, and the pressure on those remaining dealers is immense. In 2024, a national boat dealer chain called Tommy's Boats filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy after defaulting on approximately $105 million in secured debt. The company operated locations across multiple states. It had seemed stable. Then it wasn't. The pandemic boom that filled showrooms also created a trap. Dealers loaded up on inventory to meet unprecedented demand. Then demand softened. Interest rates rose. Suddenly, those dealers were sitting on boats they couldn't move, financed at rates that squeezed their margins to nothing. One industry observer described the situation plainly. Like a lot of boat dealers, they got caught with too much inventory and floor plan financing in a time of falling demand and rising rates. When dealers close or consolidate, the effects ripple outward. Service capacity shrinks. Parts availability narrows. Customers who once had options find themselves driving hours for basic maintenance. Rural and inland boat owners, already underserved, fall further into what can only be described as service deserts. But dealer pressure isn't the only squeeze tightening around boat owners. There's also insurance. If you've renewed a boat insurance policy recently, you probably noticed something alarming. Premiums have climbed approximately 12% in the past year alone, driven by higher repair costs, more frequent claims, and increasingly expensive replacement parts. The same forces straining every other part of the boating ecosystem are hitting insurance companies too, and they're passing those costs directly to policyholders. Geography makes it worse. In Wisconsin, the average annual boat insurance premium runs around $260. In Florida, it's over $800. That's more than 3 times higher, for reasons that go beyond simple risk calculation. Florida sits in the crosshairs of hurricane season, and insurers have responded by fundamentally changing how they structure policies. Hurricane deductibles, percentage-based charges that apply when storm damage occurs, have become standard practice. These aren't your typical $500 or $1,000 deductibles. On a $200,000 boat, a hurricane deductible of 5 to 10% means the owner is responsible for $10,000 to $20,000 out of pocket before coverage kicks in. The insurance industry has sustained losses for more than 5 consecutive years. Reinsurance costs, what insurance companies pay to insure themselves, have jumped 37%. In some cases, coverage for boats in high-risk regions has become nearly unobtainable at any price. The consequences are already visible. Reports have emerged of abandoned, uninsured boats appearing in South Florida marinas. Owners who can no longer afford coverage, can't find technicians, can't source parts, and can't sell their vessels for anything close to what they owe are simply walking away. When insurance costs approach the value of the boat itself, ownership stops making sense. Each of these pressures, the technician shortage, the parts wall, dealer consolidation, insurance costs, would challenge the industry on its own. Any one of them would force difficult decisions for boat owners, manufacturers, and service providers alike. But they're not arriving one at a time. They're arriving together. The boats purchased during the pandemic boom are now reaching the 5-year mark. They're aging out of warranty coverage. They're hitting the service interval where components start to fail. Water pumps, lower unit seals, ignition systems, the parts that transform reliable transportation into an expensive lawn ornament when they break. Simultaneously, the generation of technicians who know how to fix these engines is retiring. The parts that kept older boats running are being discontinued. The local dealerships that once provided a safety net are closing or consolidating. and the insurance that made ownership financially manageable is becoming unaffordable for millions. This is the convergence. This is 2026. The president of the Marine Retailers Association of America acknowledged the challenge directly. Getting people to come through the door and consider buying a boat is going to be harder than it's been in a long time. The compounding impact of inflation on boat prices, combined with the highest interest rates in years, has created a marketplace where hesitation is the default. But the crisis isn't really about new boat sales. It's about the millions of boats already on the water, owned by families who assumed the infrastructure to support them would always exist. Consider the profile of the most vulnerable owner. Someone who bought a boat 8 to 15 years ago. Someone who lives 50 miles or more from a major marine service center. Someone whose outboard comes from a discontinued line or a manufacturer that no longer exists. Someone whose insurance premium now approaches 3 to 5% of the boat's total value. For that owner, the math has changed. When the repair bill exceeds the boat's resale value, when the nearest available technician is booked for 6 months, when the parts are discontinued and the insurance is unaffordable, ownership becomes a trap, not a freedom. Yet there are signs of response. Some dealerships have created junior technician programs, pairing inexperienced workers with veteran mechanics to accelerate training. Referral bonuses encourage employees to recruit new talent. Trade associations have expanded their workforce development efforts, recognizing that the shortage threatens the entire industry's survival. Manufacturers are adapting too. Mercury Marine launched new engine platforms designed for easier service and broader parts compatibility. Yamaha invested in electric propulsion systems and battery technology partnerships. The industry understands that the old model, build it, sell it, let someone else figure out the service, is no longer sustainable. For boat owners, the message is uncomfortable but clear. Know your engine's parts situation before you need repairs. Build relationships with mechanics now, not during an emergency. Consider repowering to a supported platform if your current engine faces obsolescence. Budget realistically for insurance, maintenance, and parts. The true cost of ownership has changed. Boating has always been about freedom. The freedom to leave the dock behind, to find your own horizon, to share something irreplaceable with the people you love. But that freedom was never automatic. It rested on mechanics who knew their craft, parts that remained available, dealers who stayed local, and insurance that made sense. All of those things are changing, not someday. Now, the boats that carried families through the pandemic, that provided escape when everything else closed down, are aging into a system that wasn't built to support them for the long haul. The industry has time to adapt, but not much. And for boat owners who want to still be on the water in 2026 and beyond, the time to prepare is now. Because the best time to fix a boat is before it breaks. And the worst time is the moment you realize no one is left who can.